You are listening to Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour, a podcast released on the first 3 Wednesdays of the month. Family crisis, relationship crisis, addiction crisis, no two crisis situations are the same. They vary by family, individual, and relationship. They can encompass complex family dynamics, emotional distress, anger issues, and entitlements, and often involve substance abuse. This podcast addresses these issues and others surrounding the addiction epidemic currently plaguing this country and the world. There is hope and help.
Are you stuck, scared, or unsure of what to do next? If a situation with a loved one, spouse, or even a child has started to spiral, possibly becoming dangerous or threatening, it's time to seek help. My name is Scott H. Silverman. I help families navigate crisis situations. I'm the person you turn to in order to get you and your loved ones unstuck.
Welcome back to the show. This is Michael Glenn Moore, and you're listening to Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour. At the beginning of our show, we would like to read reviews that people will send us on Apple Podcast, and we're out. So if you would like to have a review read on the show, please go to Apple Podcast and review us and rate us. So that would be, that would help the show. Plus, you'll get to have your review read online. So that might be kind of exciting. And I think it is. Scott, what do we got going on for today?
Hey, Michael, how are you? Good to see you again. So we're out of reviews. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, we've caught up.
I can't invite any more of my friends. I went through my list until the rest of them get out of long-term incarceration. So we'll have to punch it up a little bit. Maybe our guest today might have a fan base out there that might generate some reviews. So welcome everybody. Scott H. Silverman. This is our happy hour, and the name of the show was put together because when I did a lot of my entertaining, it was during happy hour, and I think everybody should have at least an hour a day being happy. And what you do in that happy hour is your business. So today, our special guest is Chief Nisleit. Get that right?
Nisleit.
Nisleit. Okay. It's spelled Nisleit, and I don't know if I've ever heard two people say it the same way. So I've been blessed with thin hair and gray hair, and you've got an unusual last name. Anyway, Chief Nisleit is the Chief of Police of the San Diego community, 8th largest city in the country. David is an awesome individual. I've got a 14-page resume here, and I know I read it last time we got together, and you smiled all the way through it going, God, I'm not going to do that. So, but what I'll do is I'll just share with you personally what I can in a public forum. San Diego, we call it America's finest city for a reason. And David is the chief right now of our San Diego Police Department, some of the finest people on the planet. And, people always, this is a very interesting time to be in law enforcement. It's actually an interesting time to support law enforcement. And I want to share with you just a quick story, David. I don't know if I've ever shared it with you or not, but back in 1984, when I was in trouble, blacking out drinking in New York City, well, I won't go into detail, but I passed out across from the train station, and it was New York's finest that actually picked me up. I happened to carry a badge during those days, and I had a hotel key, so they thought I was there for the Undercover Narcotics Division national conference. And they took me back to the hotel. And had they arrested me or taken me in to be arrested, it would have been a real mess. So I've always had a special place in my heart with the issues I've had, because law enforcement, from my experience, first responders, were big supporters. And I know we're in a very unusual environment right now, but I think the job you have as a chief obviously is a tough one. And I know that in our community, we're seeing a lot of good, solid collaboration and cooperation with the different agencies, from criminal justice to treatment. So I'm real honored to have you here on the show today. And what I'd like to do is let you just kind of spend a moment or two talking about who you are and what you'd like our listeners and viewers to know about the Chief of San Diego Police. Welcome, David.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much, Scott. Thanks, Mike, too. Something unique about me is I'm actually a native San Diegan, born and raised. And, second generation police officer. I followed my father's footsteps on this department. I started back in 1988. And my son is a current San Diego police officer. He's been on the department for a little over 3 years, but joined the department back in February of 1988, and obviously, like everybody else, spent my first 6-7 years in patrol. But I've worked all over the department, from SWAT to internal affairs, a bunch of different investigative assignments to include gangs, a couple times, robbery, homicide, sex crimes, internal affairs, a lot of different jobs. And then prior to being promoted to chief, I was the patrol chief. And so I had the largest piece of the department. So, the 9 patrol captains reported to me. I also had the homeless outreach team and our efforts for the homeless as it pertained to HEP-A during that time before I got promoted. And now I've been the chief for about 2.5 years. And, as you said, it's a very unique time. 2020 kind of started off kind of slow, and then obviously COVID-19 came, and it really changed law enforcement. And I was very proud of the men and women. We were coming to work every single day. Our staffing actually went up as far as people coming to work, feeling that duty to help protect the community. And then obviously late May, the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis by law enforcement really changed things. Very difficult times of civil unrest. We were very fortunate. We really only had about a day, maybe a day and a half, where we saw some looting and some rioting and some violence towards law enforcement. And we've seen little pockets here and there, especially a couple of days after the incident in Wisconsin. But again, now the protests have gone back to being very peaceful, and we facilitate those day in, day out. We'll continue to do that, as we think it's important that people express their First Amendment. But difficult time for law enforcement. Obviously, we're not without sin. We need to make improvements, but there's a lot of false narrative on what's going on. And then you just saw it, this past or last week, when you saw the 2 LA sheriff deputies attacked, sitting in their car, and some of the vile information or message that was putting out at the hospital by just a select few. But it's still, when you hear what the officers are being told at protests and what's being said to them, it's difficult. We're human beings, and we have emotions, we have goals, we have families, and so we're getting it from all sides. Our family's very concerned for us. The community, some can be very difficult, and then you have the defund movement and everything else. So it's just a difficult time to be in law enforcement.
Have they caught the individual that shot the sheriffs in Los Angeles yet?
As of last night, I know they still didn't have the person identified. I know they're working around the clock to try to get this person identified. I know they've been trying to find some key witnesses that you can see actually in a videotape, especially one. I know the sheriffs, LA sheriffs are working, like I said, 7/24 to try to identify this person and take them into custody.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, for those that don't know about the incident, these are 2 officers that were actually sitting in their car, probably talking to each other, finishing up a call, maybe getting ready to go to one, I don't know when they started their shift or they're ending it, but they were just literally sitting in their car, talking to each other, and this individual walked up on them and fired into the vehicle. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it came up from the passenger side, struck the female deputy and the male deputy that were both just sitting inside their car. And they were, from what I understand, they were on post there at the metro station or train station up in LA. We're very fortunate both of those deputies will make a full recovery.
Good.
I believe the female's already out, but the male's still in custody. It might be the other way around. I know one's been released from the hospital and the other's still in ICU, but we're expected to make a recovery.
That's really good to hear. I have not heard that update. So they said they probably would, but the trauma from I can't even imagine the trauma from being shot, what that's going to look like and be like for them and their families for the rest of their life, plus their cohorts and their fellow officers. So, obviously we're immersed in year 2020 and we're in the middle of this. I think, some people call it the middle. I think it's going to go on for a little while. The COVID-19 piece has been around for several months now, causing all sorts of changes and restrictions. What is in the current situation in San Diego? What are you seeing in the community in terms of how people are dealing with this pandemic?
Yeah, that's the part that's been rough. We're seeing our domestic violence cases are, pretty much have stayed level, but they've gone up slightly lately. But what we're seeing is a lot of overdoses, a lot of deaths that way, a lot of suicides. There's definitely, just like within law enforcement, there's that uncertainty. Just this past week with us possibly going back to the tier 1. I've talked to a lot of folks that are very upset about that. These are business owners. These are folks that thought their kids might be going back to school, and So that's a stressor on everybody too, is these homeschooling these kids. And, that's difficult for our officers too, who are trying to work and trying to manage that. And so it's just a lot of unknowns, a lot of anxiety, and unfortunately some of that's morphing into the use of drugs and alcohol and the suicides, and it's tragic.
Let me ask you a direct question. As the chief of police, and your position, you're appointed. This is not an election office like the sheriff who's elected. You're hired by, I think, the mayor and the research team or hiring team that puts the names forward, and the mayor is who you report to, if I'm not mistaken, in our community, correct?
Yeah, so I went through a nationwide search. I think there was 40 candidates across the nation and interviewed. And then I was appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. And I kind of twofold to the mayor and the COO of the city.
Got it. So here's the question. A lot of people want to call this COVID political. Do you see it as political at all? And I don't mean to make it sound like a political question, but it just seems like we're so galvanized on, if you're blue, you do this. If you're red, you do that. And it's like people's hearts have been removed from their common sense and decision making. But from your perspective, what do you think?
I really try to stay out of politics. I really try to pay attention to the scientific data that's always available daily. And that's how I kind of try to base the decisions on. Obviously, I'm paying attention to county health and what the directives are coming from there, and also the state, and just trying to keep people safe and trying to stay out of the politics.
Okay. So what sorts of issues, I'm going to stay on this topic for a little bit. What sorts of issues are you seeing with your department due to COVID-19 restrictions and the negative law enforcement sentiment right now that you're getting because you're the first point of contact, you're the first responder, your 911 is usually routed to you unless it's a medical emergency. So how are your people doing? How are you doing with it?
Yeah, I mean, I have officers, and we're about 2,600 folks, between sworn and civilian, and we work around the clock. So this is hitting everybody. The difficulty of managing family time and kids, and some folks are working from home. A majority of my staff is still coming to the office every single day because we're emergency workers, we're first responders, and stuff that we do really can't do remotely from home because of our computer systems and different things.
You mean you can't do a domestic violence phone situation via Zoom? You can't get them on a Zoom?
No, we can't. So, just about even our civilian workers, our records clerks, our communication staff, those that, will do computer stuff and look into criminal histories, that all has to be done from a desktop. We can't remote in because of the firewalls and different things. So, it's anxiety just like everybody else. Is when's this going to end? Am I going to get sick? Different things. They've got loved ones, and then you top that on to the narrative of law enforcement. Some of our officers are getting pressure from families to get out of this business. We're still needing to recruit. We've been very fortunate, like other departments have seen a lot of people retire. We have not seen that. I've actually seen my applications go up. Just slightly, but so that's, to me, sends a strong message that you still have a lot of folks that want to be part of something bigger than themselves and want to join in right now. But again, we're very fortunate, as I've spoken to you before, we're not immune from the addiction problems and the wellness problems. And I'm very lucky that we have a very robust wellness program. And we have not seen that yet, but this is stuff that we pay attention to because, people are concerned, and we think we're getting out of COVID, and it seems like we're going backwards again and forward. And so, the uncertainty for anybody is cause for a lot of anxiety, and we're no different.
Right, and clearly, I would assume the same issues happening, with your team as is with the rest of the community. People, you have two income earners in the house. Now there's only one income earner, and we know how much huge salaries are for law enforcement. So if there was a second income and that's gone now and kids are home, you've got to, and again, it's not the kind of business where, because somebody was joking last week about, if this defunding goes through, are they going to be able to do domestic violence on Zoom calls? It's not going to happen. It's a joke. But the point is how, obviously you've thought about it, I would assume, but the concept around defunding law enforcement, we need them more than ever. But I think my more important question is, I feel it is, the residual effects or the side effects of this impact of the stressors. And, look, your people have to wear masks like we're all supposed to, but they're in contact with people all day long, and not necessarily, I know the homeless population, the hygiene is not practiced well. And clearly, their level of consciousness around protecting each other and others around them is not as high as, say, somebody who's got the education. So what is it, from your perspective, the things that you're experiencing with your team that was not something that probably was on your radar months ago?
Well, in simple fact of COVID, of responding and really having to pay attention to, personal protective equipment. And, to date, I think I've had 37 staff members test positive for COVID. And obviously that's a concern. I've had, and most of those are sworn officers that are out in the field contacting folks. And you can, do everything you can to not get sick, but, it's inevitable when you're out in the field and different things like that. Plus we're out in the community too, that officers are going to get sick. And so then it's, that contact tracing, trying to minimize it as it, some commands can get more impacted than others. Initially, our Southern Division was impacted the greatest, and that also was the zip code that had the highest test rate or positive rate in the county. So that was just very interesting. But obviously, officers are concerned about getting sick and bringing it home to their loved ones. And, I have some that live with folks that have, compromised immune systems or elderly parents, and they don't want to do that. And so they're not seeing their parents. I haven't seen my father in about 5 months because he's in an assisted living facility and he's under lockdown. And so, those are all the kind of stressors that our officers face, and just like everybody else. And, that's the biggest thing that I always try to convey is, we're human beings. We might wear a badge and a gun, but no different than anybody else. And so we have the same stressors in life as everybody else, sometimes a little bit more with everything that's going on right now.
So speaking of stressors, so what types of resources do you have available? I know you mentioned wellness for your department. And by the way, I'm still waiting for my phone call. I want to be a resource. You smile. I know how busy you are, but you know what I do. And, I was just on the DA's opioids webinar yesterday, and there was mention about a law enforcement. I think they said the city, I wasn't sure it's your department or not, that was exposed to fentanyl on some sort of arrest. Was that one of your team members or another part of the community?
No, we've had a couple officers over the last 6 months get exposed to fentanyl, and that's another danger that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of overdose throughout the county on fentanyl, and so we've got a lot. We have a wellness unit, so the wellness unit consists of sworn personnel and a civilian that have extra training, and then obviously we have what we call our focus group, which is our psychological services. We have an employee assistance program. We have peer support. And these are officers that have had these kind of stressors, experiences in their life that can kind of share their experience and help somebody walk through some difficult times in their life. And then we have a very good and very excellent chaplain program. And we have chaplains assigned to every patrol command and some of our investigative commands. And I have one that checks on me weekly. And so those are, just have a whole lot of things, and hoping to get more. I know we've had conversations, and I know we still need to get together to kind of continue our conversations.
Right, because if that doesn't happen, Michael, he's in a different part of the country. He's got some major influencers. He'll make some phone calls, and it'll get rough on you, David. So I want to be part of that because I just think it's important. And I know my fan base, and you heard it on our call last month. There's a lot of people out there want to be part of and help. So tell me, how can the community help you right now? What is it, if you were to extend your arms and go, boy, here's 3 things we could really use from the community, what would you want the community to hear from you that you've heard from your officers and staff that we could do or offer, or other than thoughts and prayers and delivering? I understand donuts are coming and pizza's coming periodically, which is great, but from your heart to the communities, what can we do to help?
I think the biggest, and it's actually simple, is just, you see an officer, walking into a Starbucks or a different thing. It's simple. Just, hey, I appreciate what you do for a living. I appreciate you out here protecting us. Or if you see in the car, just a simple wave and to say a thank you. And, the most difficult thing we have going on right now with this narrative is convincing the officers that they still have a lot of support. And I know they do. And so the simple, just the words of, hey, thank you. really lift up spirits. I know it does every single time someone comes up to me, not realizing I'm the chief, and they'll just say, "Hey, I appreciate you, putting yourself on the line." And it means a lot because, at times I know our cops are questioning how much support we truly have, and tell them how much we do. And we look at polls all the time, and we have a tremendous amount of support. We're just not hearing from them.
Got it.
So that's the difficult part right now, is even our supporters don't really want to be vocal because they're fearful that they might be targeted. So it's just the kind words, thank you. It goes a long, long way to officers. I know when my son gets told it, I know it makes his day because he tells me about it.
Right. So, Michael, you heard it. So when our podcast goes out in a couple of weeks, for those of you that are watching, when you see a first responder, let them know. Just tell them you're grateful. And because I'm sure they're hearing other things from other people that are unsolicited, and just let them know how you feel and thank them for what they're doing. I mean, I try to whenever possible. I hate walking up to them, especially when they have the radar guns out, but we haven't seen that for a while.
Yeah.
But because we have one on our heel over off of Mount Soledad, there's a couple of guys that seem to really love their job when the sun shines out. And I don't want to pull up during that situation because I'm sure I'll get jacked for doing that. So tell us how are you personally? I see you've got a bicycle over your shoulder there. So how are you personally dealing with the situation? Because clearly, even though you're probably off some parts of the day, when something serious happens, my sense is your pager, your phone goes off, and you're questioned or updated, or you need to make yourself available to whatever's going on. So your life's probably not yours. By the way, before you answer that, you just went away on a vacation, but we'll answer that question secondly.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with all of this personally?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, so, literally I'm on call 7 days a week unless I leave, which I only usually leave about once a year. So like last night we had multiple shootings, so I'll get calls on those, I'll get updates on those, and having, text conversation with other chiefs, making certain that we're putting assets in place to try to minimize these additional shootings that we're concerned about happening. But, I've always been somebody that's very involved in physical fitness. And so you probably can see not only my Peloton, but you can also probably see my road bike behind me. I'm an avid runner, so this morning I was up at 6 o'clock in the morning running on the boardwalk. Orange Theory Fitness, I've always been a guy that's been heavily involved in endurance sports. So that's kind of my escape. Now I do carry my phone with me the whole time, no matter where I go, because I have to answer it. But that's my escape is athletics, fitness, golf, when I can get away. My wife's very involved in fitness herself, and so that's our escape.
Great. So that's the other part of that question. You went on vacation. Did you have a good time? Did you kind of get a chance to decompress and forget about what day-to-days look like?
Yeah, it usually takes me a day or two to kind of decompress once I get there, but it was a great trip for the wife and I to kind of get away and just reacquaint ourselves with each other and say, hey, I'm your husband. You don't see me a whole lot because I'm gone a lot, but yeah, we had a great time and we had great accommodations, and it was very peaceful.
So let me ask a personal question. I'm going to ask it anyway, but did you have to wear a name tag to make sure your wife knew who you were the first couple of days? Because I went through that about 2 years ago with my wife. I came home, she called me Jim or something. So the next I came home with a name tag, because stress sometimes does that when you spend time away, and now we're so close together. It's, well, another story for another day, but did you have to wear a name tag your first couple of days?
She still knows who I am.
Good. Very good. So share with us, if you wouldn't mind, what is your biggest regret if you look back over the months and years?
Being in law enforcement is very difficult, and just regrets are, public trust is, what can we do better? What can I do better? Is looking inside and kind of grading myself every single week of what can I do better? And it's just, trying to get the word of what we're trying to do out there, and rebuilding this police department and everything like that. So my regrets are, not being able to hire enough people to get us fully staffed, because that impacts our ability to provide quicker services for those that call 911. But regrets, mistakes, we have all made them. I look at mistakes as my ability to become a better leader and learn from that. So, regrets is, just the public trust. There's some erosion, and it's difficult because, it's even being eroded from what happens, on the East Coast, or what happens in the middle of the city has impacts here. And that's the one thing that's very difficult about our profession, is even if it didn't happen in this state, it still has impact on us here.
So a catastrophic event in Kansas or Texas or Florida that might put a negative light on law enforcement, unfortunately, is kind of like a wave that comes over San Diego and you're impacted by it. There aren't many industries like that. And when you talk about, not being, because I know the city's, been understaffed because you have being a large force, you have people retiring all the time and maybe being offered, opportunities to move somewhere else for, 10, 15% increase. Plus cost of living, San Diego is not easy. We all know that. It doesn't matter what level of income you're at, but the idea that you're in an industry that you can be having great numbers, good retention, awesome relationships, and then something like that hits, it washes over on you, whether you like it or not, then you have to deal with it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it does. And, and the good thing is we have really good relationship community. They can be better, no doubt. But, and so I think that parlays into why you haven't seen the really bad civil unrest like you're seeing in, Portland and Seattle and back east. We had a couple bad days and then, people got peaceful. So I think that really kind of lends itself to our relationships and the fact that, we are listening. I made some very quick changes that were, that needed to happen. And I made them very, very quick. I think I was the first chief to take away the carotid restraint in the nation. And so making those positive changes, I think opened the dialogue with our community to continue moving, and we'll continue to have those dialogues.
Good. So excuse me, another question for you. What have we not asked you? And I'm sure Michael's going to come up with a couple questions. What have we not asked you that you'd like us to ask you? Meaning, what is it you'd like to share that I may not have thought of about asking that you think you'd like us to?
Yeah, we kind of touched on that, and that's, the little bit of the false narrative. And, I really want people to understand that, we're human beings, we're part of the community. And, that I know that the officers, you spend a ton amount of time in the areas you work. You spend some 40, 50 hours in the community that you work, and we try to keep officers in the same areas as possible. And so, we just want to be seen as folks that really there to help problem solve, to help keep the city safe, to kind of be that gap between good and evil. And but we have goals and we have dreams, and we want to own the homes, we want to raise our kids in a safe environment, and then go on to retire. But we also know that this is a dangerous job. And I've had my 2.5 years, I've had 2 officers shot. I've had multiple officers shot at, and it's a dangerous job right now, and we're seeing it's becoming even more dangerous. I don't know if the stats bear that, but it just seems like officers are being assaulted a lot lately, to include here in San Diego. So it's a difficult time, and just all of us, we just need to kind of put the violence down and just start having conversation, honest conversation, because we can all do better.
And obviously, most of your sworn officers are in a marked vehicle, which says they work for the San Diego Police Department, and they're in uniform and they have a badge on. So it's not like they can, blend in like other people do that work at, restaurants or drive trucks or so on and so forth. So you're right. They're walking around and they're very, very visible. So last question that I can think of is, if you had a magic wand, what would you like to do with it? And I'll tell you what, I don't give anybody more than one wish, but I'll give you 3 because I know you dressed casually today for this interview.
Yeah, just, magic wish is just, the violence to go away. We had multiple shootings, and, just the communities to come together and honor our differences and, and engage in good conversation. That would probably be my best, and just, understand that we have a job to do, and we're here to keep the community safe, and just that immediate trust, community trust, would be something great, and this narrative to go away. Because I don't know of any officer that wakes up on any given morning and say, hey, today's a good day to shoot anybody. I've done this for 32 years. I've never shot anybody, and that was always my goal. And the majority of officers, not just on our department, but all departments, go through a 30-year career and never fire their weapon in the field. The only time they fire a weapon is in training. And so, those are some of my dreams. Just, as I say a prayer every single night, is to keep our first responders, that includes PD, fire, and I also include the military, and just, keep our folks safe, keep them out of conflict, and keep our community safe. And that's really my goal. And that's what we're trying to do in a nutshell. But unfortunately, we live in a world that has violence. And, so if we could do away with violence, we wouldn't need officers, to be real honest with you, in a perfect world. But that's what it is.
Right. Yeah. And trying to find alternatives to that, social workers, therapists knocking. I can just see them knocking on doors at 4 a.m. Hey, we hear something's going on. You want to talk about it? How about a big hug first before we start the conversation? I just don't even see that happening. But I know we have a great PERT team here in San Diego. By the way, today is Rosh Hashanah, so I'll put you in my prayers. Our Jewish New Year started last night, and we have 10 days of it, and Yom Kippur's coming up, and I'm happy to say I don't have you on my atonement list. I don't have anything I think I have to atone for, at least with the San Diego PD. Not that I ever got caught for, and I know you can't pull my sheet. It's been a sponge, so it's hard to get to. But if you ever want to know, let me know. So I think from my end, I'll wrap up after Michael goes. Mike, do you have some questions for the chief?
Well, I just want to ask him a simple question. Being that you're in charge of such a large squad, what is the work-wise, what is the hardest part of what you do?
Yeah, the hardest part for me, and it's always been the hardest part since I got into, management but now as the chief, is really sending my folks into harm's way. I know we're at the tip of the spear. I have some units that really go after those that are the extremely violent folks. And knowing that I'm giving them a mission that puts them in harm's way is difficult. Like I said, I've had 2 officers shot. I've had multiple other officers shot at. And that's difficult because I know they have family. And I think we all know when you enter this profession that there's always a chance that you won't return home from your shift. But knowing that I'm the one that's giving the directive to go out there and do this job, it's difficult. It weighs heavy on you. And I know I've spoken to other chiefs too from big cities, and that's the same thing with them is, you're asking people to go into harm's way. But I feel good about it because I also put myself in harm's way for multiple years. I was on specialized units doing the same thing. So I feel comfortable with that. I feel comfortable that we're well-trained, we're well-equipped, that we'll be successful.
Well, Scott, before we get the chief to give his final quote, you haven't mentioned your phone number. I just wonder if you want to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, well, first, thanks very much, David, the Chief of San Diego Police Department, being with us here today. Really appreciate your time. And, you mentioned a couple of things like, you want to build trust and you want people to understand what you do. Those are really good headlines, but I'd like to maybe do a deeper dive one day and figure out what does that actually translate to? What would that mean? Give somebody 4 or 5 ideas, and how do we do that? Because I know you've got, different groups that are overseeing what you do and taking action, but I think there's a disconnect with the community and the popo, if you will, not really understanding. And you're right. These are people who, if we were all at the beach naked, you'd have no idea. I mean, we used to do a big cleanup downtown when I was at Second Chance, and we put everybody in a T-shirt, and you didn't know if somebody was a retired unlicensed pharmacist or a judge or a lawyer or a teacher or a restaurateur or someone who's retired. You don't know, but so in some ways it's almost like because you're labeled, there's a stigma that goes along with that. In my industry with substance abuse and addiction, we're always trying to reduce stigma. So it'd be nice maybe to talk about how we could help each other, at least that way, because I think from a PR perspective, when you say it and ask for it, it's kind of like when I say to others, hey, you'd really need to get your kid to stop drinking. That doesn't really translate to people's brain. It's kind of like, it's just like, isn't it a nice day? Well, if someone's having a bad day, it doesn't matter what you say to them. So that's with true. That, again, thank you for being here today. And I really appreciate your time. I know this is probably, almost like a, half a day off for you, but it's Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour. And if you need anything, or I can be of any help, or if you have questions or concerns that I can, move over to the chief. I don't actually have his contact info, but I have Sarah's, and she's very good at getting information to him. So one day I'll get his phone number, then I'm going to retire. That's kind of what I'm looking for.
I'll send it to you, Scott, through Sarah. Absolutely. You can have my cell number, no problem.
Yeah, I've heard that before, and I've been disappointed as well. So sounds like a 3. Yeah, I'm not going to bother you unless I have to. So call me, please, 619-993-2738. Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour. We're here to be of help. Let us know what we can talk about. Let us know who we should be talking to. And if you like what you hear, go online, give us a review, and let us know what we can do to improve the way we're trying to help you improve what it is you want to see in the community.
Okay, Chief, why don't you go ahead and give us your quote, and that will end us for today.
Yeah, it's a quote that I tell new recruits. It's also a quote that I tell folks of who I just promoted. I say, to whom much is given, much is expected.